Hello. So since you missed the TAT on Monday, I decided to cover the concept test in this video. So I think you just need to treat this video as a normal tutorial, meaning that you have to do the test yourself first before watching the video. So we are covering only the concept test. Go do the concept test now. And just pause the video and just come back after you finish the concept test. It is 15 minutes, so I'm giving you 15 minutes to go do the concept test and come back. Okay, let's begin with the concept test. Remember from week 3 we were doing the ACVC, the section on ACVC. We discussed the advantages of the variable costing system that it enabled us to perform the CVP analysis and be able to calculate the break-even point. So the break-even point uses the variable costing statement. So let's just look at the variable costing statement very quickly. We have the sales, less variable cost, we get contribution, and less fixed cost, we get the net profits. This is just a simplified variable costing statement. At the break-even point, the profits must be 0. So in order for the profits to be 0 here, the contribution must equal the fixed cost. So they will cancel each other and the answer will be 0. So for example, if the contribution is 10,000, the fixed cost must be 10,000 in order for it to be 0. So that's the break-even point. So the answer for BQ1 is D. Okay. So moving on to BQ2. So in BQ2 we are required to calculate the break-even point in units. So you just need here to use the break-even point formula in units, which is fixed cost divided by contribution per units. The fixed costs were given, which are 200,000, but the contribution per unit you had to calculate. Here they told you that the variable cost ratio is 80%, so that means the contribution ratio will be 20%. So take that 20% and you multiply it by 100 Rand per unit, which give us 20 Rand per unit. So our contribution will be 20 Rand per unit. So fixed cost 200,000, contribution per unit it's 20 Rand, and our break-even point will be 10,000 units. So let's move on now to BQ3. For questions like BQ3, where you are required to calculate the profits or loss and they give you the units, or you need to calculate the units but they give you the profits or loss, I just suggest you use the profit formula, because I just think it's a very simple way to understand it. So this is the profit formula. You have the selling price multiplied by the units minus all the costs, which are fixed cost, plus variable cost per unit multiplied by the units. So this is the profit formula. I just think whenever you encounter this kind of question, you use the formula. You just replace the values that you have and just solve for the value you don't have. So for BQ3, let's look at it here. You are given the units and the rest of the values are from BQ2. So let's just replace these values here. We have the selling price from BQ2 and the units is 8,000. The fixed cost is 200,000 from BQ2, and the variable cost is 80 Rand from its 100 multiplied by 80% here. So it's 80% multiplied by 100, the variable cost per unit. So you just need to multiply this and solve for the profits. Your answer will be a loss of 40 Rand. Okay, so let's move on to BQ4. In BQ4 we are required to calculate the margin of safety. It's from your book. The margin of safety is actually a measure of the extent to which the current sales or expected sales can drop before we make a loss. So you can either calculate the margin of safety in units, or you can calculate it in percentages. In units, you just take the current sales or expected sales minus the break-even units. And in percentages, you just take the sales, the current sales or expected sales, minus the break-even in units, divided by those current sales or expected sales, multiplied by 100 to make a percentage value. So let's look at BQ4. They gave us the expected sales, which is 15,000, and we will use the break-even point that we calculated in BQ2, which is 10,000. So 15,000 minus 10,000 divided by 15,000 multiplied by 100%, which give us 33%. Okay, so let's move on to BQ5. So for BQ5, it's one of those questions like BQ3, where I suggested that you use the profit formula. So here in BQ5, you're given the profits, you need to calculate the units. So you're given the profits, the selling price per unit, the variable cost per unit, and the fixed cost. You just need to use your profit formula and just solve for the units. Let's just substitute these values that we have and calculate the units that we don't have. So you just make your units X and just substitute those values. We have the profits, the selling price per unit, the fixed cost, the variable cost per unit. You just need to solve for X. You know from high school how to solve for X, and the units will be 3,000. So let's move on to BQ6 now. BQ6 is a little bit complicated. I just think you need to understand what contribution is in order to do this question. So let's just look at it right now. Contribution contributes towards covering fixed costs and toward making profits. That's why it's called contribution. Now, at the break-even point, contribution only contributes towards covering all the fixed costs because the profit is 0. So if you have to produce one more unit after covering all fixed costs, that one more unit will contribute towards making a profit, and it will contribute towards making a profit at the value of its contribution. So the answer for BQ6 will be 350, because the contribution for that one more unit is 350. So for BQ7, you are required to calculate the units that you need to sell in order to contribute towards these extra fixed costs. So you do have your contribution, which is 350, and these fixed costs are 175. So it's just like calculating the break-even point, but the question was rephrased in a different way. So you take your fixed cost divided by your contribution per unit. So you will need to sell 500 units in order to cover these extra fixed costs. So let's move on to question BQ8, the last question of the test. So BQ8 is one of those questions where I suggested you use the profit formula in order to work them out. But BQ8 was a little bit complicated because it had the fixed portion of the profits and the variable portion of the profits. So it's the same idea, but you need to add the fixed portion of the profits plus the variable portion of the profits multiplied by the units, because the units are the ones that we're trying to work them out. And the selling price also varies with the units. You say 400 multiplied by the number of units. We have the fixed cost and we have the variable cost per unit. And you just need to solve for X. It's easy from here. And your units will be 2,750. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can just email me. You know my email address. Just good luck, guys, for your test next week. Study hard and you'll be okay.